Yesterday I was talking about the question, where are you? And we're going to be thinking about a couple of other questions this morning. And I had some really lovely conversations with people yesterday, and so thank you for talking to me. And I just wanted to say as well, I know that one of the stories I told yesterday didn't land very well, and Kang San was talking about misreading culture a little bit, and I'm aware that for some of you, I probably did that yesterday, coming from Scotland, which is quite a different place just now. So I'm a peacemaker by the way that I'm wired, and I don't like to upset people. So if something landed badly with you yesterday, I apologise for that. And I hope that as we look through things today, you'll be able to hear them in the spirit that I intend for them to land today. So I ask for a bit of grace in that as we go through today. One of the things that I said to you guys yesterday was that I'm training to be a spiritual director, and so questions are really important to me, and the way that we ask questions and answer questions are really, really important as well. So today we're going to be looking together at a story also in Genesis, and it's the story of Jacob. So we're talking about the questions that God asks us. So we're going to read together. I do realise that's quite small, by the way. That's more for me than it is for you. We're going to read together from Genesis chapter 32. And I'm imagining that you will be quite familiar with this passage. That night Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone. And a man wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it's daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." The sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the Israelites do not eat the tendon attached to the socket of the hip, because the socket of Jacob's hip was touched near the tendon. So here's my first thing that I want us to think about this morning, which is, who is asking this question? Who is asking this question? Because in the passage on a few occasions it says the man. So is it a man? Is it just simply a human being who came across Jacob and they had this wrestling match and it's just a man? Is it the angel of the Lord? Some versions interpret it in that manner, that it's the angel of the Lord. And perhaps a good reason for that is because in Hosea chapter 12 and verse 4, reflecting on this passage, it says he struggled with the angel and overcame him. He wept and begged for his favour. He found him at Bethel and talked with him there. So there's obviously an understanding in its own cultural context that maybe, that it was more than just a man. It was perhaps even the angel of the Lord. And then, of course, Jacob says that he saw God face to face. So is it a theophany? Is it an appearance of God himself? Is it even an appearance of Christ? And the bottom line to this is, we don't know. I know that's a really disappointing answer to give you, but it's the truth, isn't it? There is a sense in which it's fair from the passage and from its wider context to understand that it could be any those things, or all of them, or one of them. But there's a sense in which something deep is happening here, that Jacob is having an encounter in some way with the Lord himself in this experience. And here's our key question today. What is your name. What is your name? In the midst of this continual wrestling match, the key question is this: what is your name? And I would say that it's a key cultural question for us, isn't it, right now? It's the question that my kids, who are both final year students at university, they're not twins, they're actually 3 school years apart, but, life and all that. So they're both in the final year. It's the key question that they are asking. It's the key question that their friends are asking. Who am I? At all sorts of different levels. Both of them are having that conversation with me right now, which is, I'm going to have to be an adult, aren't I? What does that mean? When you stop being at school and you stop doing your uni course and you're struggling to get a grad job because there's so many applicants for every one job. Who am I now? What does this mean now for me that I've got to be an adult? Mm-hmm. What do I call myself? What do you call me? From whom or where do I derive my sense of identity at all different levels of what that might look like for any one of us or the people that we love? We talk a lot about identity. Sometimes we talk about mistaken identity. Let me embarrass myself for a moment here. I used to be on the leadership of a conference called Fresh Streams, and one year when I was leading, one of the ministers came to the front on a session and he just heard that his 10-year-old son had been diagnosed with leukemia. And he shared that with us so that we might stand with him and pray for him at that immensely difficult time. His name was Nigel. So I, as one of the leaders of the conference, went around thinking and praying for Nigel. And I went up to this guy and I said, how's things with your son? He said, I'm John. And I said, I'm so sorry. I didn't know Nigel, I'd just seen him at the front, right? He said, I'm John. I said, I'm so sorry, I'm really embarrassed. Well, that would have been bad enough, right? I did it 2 more times. 2 more times. I'm normally quite good with people. Like, it is my job, right? I just, for whatever reason, I had mixed up. They did look sort of vaguely similar, but John and Nigel, so embarrassing. Maybe you've had that. We're walking along the street, you think you've seen someone, you go, yeah. Maybe that's happened to you as well. We have mistaken identity. We talk a lot now about identity theft, don't we? Our shredding machines are worked 100%. As we try to make sure that we've got rid of all data and information that could lead other people with nefarious intent to us. Because we're worried about identity theft. Some of us experience a loss of identity, and that can be for so many different reasons. I was once leading a women's weekend for my church, and I got them to make a little box. And then I said, just write things about you on the side of the box. This was supposed to be the easy bit at the beginning of the weekend. And I looked up, and someone who I know well was in tears. She said, well, I always used to write daughter, but my mum died in the last few months. And now I don't know what to write. We can easily be in that space. Maybe it's because we've lost our job. Maybe it's because I'm just retired now. And I used to say that I was this and that and the other, but now I'm just retired. My office in my church was in the old organ loft. They had got rid of the organ. And so people had to come upstairs. And generally as they walked up the stairs, they go, oh, hi, it's never just anybody. Never just anybody. Always a person, a real person with a life, with gifts and talents and a personality. You're a person, but we can lose our sense of identity and not be sure who we are anymore. And sometimes there's just uncertainty about our identity, and people again can experience that at so many different levels in their lives. My kids have just left home. I'm still a mum, but my experience of that is a lot different than it was 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, when it felt like all that was my identity for a while. Things can be different there. We can feel uncertain, or we can have a chameleon-like identity. I wonder whether you've ever found yourself imitating the accent of the person that you're talking to. It's super embarrassing. Don't do that. But it's this just desire to fit in. Or we start to mimic the patterns of the way people speak. I talk a lot about we, this and that and the other things now because I live in Scotland and that's what everyone does. I also use the word out with to mean outside because that's what everybody else does. I even use my verbs differently than I used to for the whole rest of my life. It's just a desire to fit in. And sometimes that means that we are a bit like a chameleon. And in being a chameleon, we can be helpful, but we can also lose who we are supposed to be in ourselves. I thought we might need a bit of culture. This is it. Shakespeare, famous poet and playwright. What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. That is your culture for the day, so enjoy it. Names can be significant, can't they? In the past, your name, or probably your surname, probably said something about who you were, your profession, what you did. We had a guy in our church, I used to call him Andy Drum. I mean, there's no big rewards for working out why I called him that. Andy Drum, because he always played the drums, And there's a thing that's called nominative determinism. Have you come across that? Yeah. Well, I wanted to give you some illustrations this morning, just because it's fun, really. So here we have David Waterhouse, houseboat owner. Alan Toogood, the Samaritans volunteer. Andrew Drinkwater from the Water Research Centre, and Tom Kitchen, chef proprietor. We also have Dr. Pam Graves, archaeologist at Durham University, and Lieutenant Les McBurney from the Sun Prairie Fire Department. Christian Guy from the Centre for Social Justice. And you're going to have two here. Dr. Gavin Breeds from the Gynaecologist and Obstetrician. And I don't know if you remember when we had all those petrol shortages not so long ago. And they had one of the reporters from one of the fuel stations, and his name was Phil McCann. Names are important. I don't know if they lived up to their name or the other way around, but names are important. And I guess we've all had these things that are kind of like Christmas cracker jokes, aren't they? Studying Nature by Teresa Green, Falling Off a Cliff by Eileen Dover, and Feeding a Dog by Nora Bones, kind of jokes my dad likes. And names and their meanings in the Bible are very significant. I don't know whether those of you who have children thought very hard about your names that you gave to your children. Some people, it's massively significant and it carries all sorts of layers of meaning. And other people just say, well, I like that name, or I knew somebody that I really liked, and so we've called them that name, and they don't think overly much about it. But names in the Bible are so significant. And here's a bunch of them that you'll be familiar with. And of course, names go in cycles, don't they? So we had a bunch of kind of names that were really popular in the days when everyone was called Thomas. And now we're into a whole new phase. We've had the kind of Elijah phase and Noah. And now we're into a new phase again. We have Ezekiel's and all sorts of things. Now, some of you are more familiar with those kind of names, but our Sunday schools are full of people with Bible names because we love them and the meanings that they have. It seems to me that when we look at name changes in the Bible, there's a key truth there. Their names were changed in relation to their relationship with God. That's why they were changed. It was always to do with their relationship with God. And I think that there's a truth here that our truest identity is found in our relationship with God. It talks about being in Christ. In Christ. And that's the relationship that will last eternally. that relationship, the one where we are in Christ. And this is just some of the things that are true for us as we find our relationship in Christ, our relationship in God, that we are reconciled to God. We are blessed, equipped, loved. We are God's workmanship, his masterpiece, his poem. We are treasured. We're filled with the Spirit. We're under grace. We're never alone. We're righteous. We are made righteous. We are chosen and called and sealed and saved, free from condemnation. A child of God, forgiven, redeemed, adopted into his family, accepted, rescued, healed. All of those things that are true of us as we find our identity in our relationship with God. So let's go back to Jacob, shall we? What's in a name? Well, Jacob's whole life had been a struggle. His whole life had been a struggle. Jacob and Esau, twins, struggling even in the womb. And Esau was born first, but Jacob was following on quickly after, holding the heel of his brother. His position in the family was always just slightly second. Just slightly second. He was more of a homebody than his brother, who was a hunter. But his whole life, it feels like even from the womb, had been a struggle for him. He tries, with a little help from his mum, to make everything right for him, humanly speaking. How can I get ahead? How can I do better? How can I have the blessing? How can I have the birthright that is rightly my brother's? And so, humanly speaking, he works out how to struggle and to fight and to get what he wants from life. And he learns from his earliest days to live out his identity. And one of the meanings for Jacob is deceiver. So he gets his birthright for a stew, because he knows his brother's hungry when he comes home from hunting, and he's not really thinking about his birthright just then, so he's like, more importantly, let me have stew. Can't beat stew and dumplings, can you really? And then later on, his mum says, come on, let's put hairy skins on your arms, and let's go into your father who can't really see you anymore, and let's make sure he blesses you. His whole existence is wrapped up in this sense of deception, of grasping, of getting, of manipulating, of fixing. Even when he is deceived by Laban and giving Leah to marry, he goes, it's fine, I can fix this. I'll just work harder for another 7 years. I am going to get what I want. I wonder what you would say was your identity and how you've reached it. We all have a story, don't we? We all have a story of origin, where we've come from. We have a story of life and what we have done to life and what it has done to us. We all have a story. We all have things in our characters, strengths and weaknesses, and in our experience, which forms who we are. Genesis 32 for Jacob is an absolutely key moment in his life, because by this stage he's successful. He's married with many sons, he's wealthy with flocks of sheep and goats, and he's on his way to meet and be reconciled with his twin brother Esau, who he has treated so poorly in the past and probably feels he's been running from for his whole life. Now, there wasn't WhatsApp in those days, so it took a while for things to actually happen. But he sent messages to Esau, travelled for days to send these messages to say, I want to meet you. And he now knows that Esau is on his way to meet him. Now, when you have a whole lifetime of distance between you and another person, and when that's founded on deception and, in effect, theft of the things that were rightly Esau's, I imagine that you feel somewhat anxious about what this meeting is going to look like. Jacob is choosing at last to do the right thing, but he doesn't know that that's going to be reciprocated. He doesn't know what is going to happen. And so in this moment in this story, we find him characterized by being alone. He is alone. He's sent everybody else away. He said, I'm just going to be here on my own. I think that's brave. He makes himself vulnerable to the situation and to whatever that's going to look like. He's there waiting. As I said, they don't have WhatsApp. He doesn't know what the ETA is. He's just there. He's just waiting for when Esau might come. As I said, he's vulnerable. I mean, Esau might come and kill him or send somebody else to kill him. He doesn't know what is going to happen. And I imagine that he is afraid. Maybe those are words that we resonate with ourselves. I imagine that in our lives there are those key moments when we might feel pretty alone. And maybe we're waiting, but we don't even know what we're waiting for exactly. And we feel super vulnerable and maybe afraid. They're human conditions, aren't they? They're things that happen to us from time to time. I think in terms of ministry, there is times when we feel hugely alone. Does that make sense to you? When you've come back from that meeting and it's been difficult and you've tried your best, at least you think you have, and you go home to your house and you maybe, if you live with somebody else, you were able to explain it to them, but sometimes you can't. And even if you do, it doesn't kind of quite make sense the same that it does in your own head. And you just feel alone. And I don't know about you, but it often used to be pretty late at night when I got home from a leaders' meeting. It's not really the time to ring someone for a coffee, is it? Or maybe it is. You feel alone. Sometimes you're hopeful that something will change, that a person will change, that a situation will change. And you're just waiting. But you don't know. You don't know it's going to change. You're hoping it will change, but you just wait. And waiting can feel really long, especially when you don't know when it's going to happen, if it's going to happen. And there are definitely moments where we feel vulnerable, aren't there? Where we share something and we feel deeply exposed by what we've shared. Where we've been in a situation where we've offered something of ourselves and it's not been quite how we hoped. When there's stuff going on in our personal lives that we're not sure that we can bring into the public space, so that wouldn't be appropriate, but we feel vulnerable in that. And at times we just feel afraid. I've stood at the front of church members' meetings and for the most part they were pretty good. And I felt scared. I could feel my knees knocking and my legs quivering. I felt scared. Maybe you've had those experiences too. Jacob finds himself in this key moment, and in that moment he is attacked by a stranger. Yeah, that's really not what you want, is it? You're alone, you're feeling afraid anyway, it's dark, you're waiting for your brother who probably hates you to come, and then you're attacked by a stranger. And they wrestle together. And, it's a weird thing. It's weirdly intimate. It's like hand-to-hand combat we're talking about here. It's not at the end of a sword or something. It's strangely intimate. It's a struggle. It goes on for a really long time. I mean, you have to be impressed with Jacob, right? He must be fiercely strong. He's been walking around and herding animals his whole life. He's probably fought off wild animals. He is strong. It goes on and on and on. And it's exhausting. And at the end of the day, it almost feels like they're both exhausted. But But neither of them is going to let go. No one is going to lose this battle, this wrestling match. They're going to hang on in there. It's bewildering and it's confusing. It's really, really a significant encounter that Jacob has in this moment, and he's yet to fully understand what on earth is going on, apart from this guy is wrestling with him and hasn't killed him, but he's just continuing to wrestle with him. And there seems to be no end. Wrestling with God is a sign of intimacy. Because you can't wrestle with someone that you're far away from. I've definitely had my own wrestles with God. I mentioned to you last night about that crisis of faith I had around the time that Madeleine McCann went missing. I wrestled with God. I questioned him. I challenged him. That is okay, by the way. I found it so hard. I was leading a prayer team to Kosovo in the middle of all that. We were supposed to be somebody else was doing this bit. We were supposed to read Psalm 91 together at the beginning of each evening. I said, I can't do this. It says that God looks after people. I can't do it. I can't read it with integrity. I'm struggling with this because it doesn't feel to me like this is true. I was wrestling with it. And in the end, I had a sense that God was giving me a choice. Here's the choice. Do you want to choose to trust me, or do you want to choose not to? Frankly, that's not a great choice, okay, but it was my choice. Maybe you've wrestled with other stuff. And God has kind of felt near and far in equal measure. It's like you cross and you're struggling and you're disappointed with something and you want God to go far away, except that you actually also don't. Because you want to wrestle with him and he is wrestling with you in that space. There's something deeply intimate about a God who cares enough about us to wrestle with us in the difficult things, in our questions, in our disappointments, in the things that don't work out as we hope they would, in the prayers that are not answered for us in the way that we wanted them to be, that God is close to us in those difficult and dark times where we feel alone and vulnerable and afraid. He is with us even in that. And it's in this moment that we hear that question. The man says to him, "What is your name?" What's your name? What is your name? And he says, "My name is Jacob." And he owns who he is. And actually that's a really important thing, isn't it? Just to own who we are. And say to God, this is who I am. This is my name. And trust God with what he does with that. And in this particular story, Jacob's hip is put out of joint. I imagine that hurt. I imagine it hurt. But it was something that he lived with for his whole life after that. It was evidence of the encounter with God that enabled him to receive his true God-given identity. Because the angel, the Lord, said to him, "You're not going to be Jacob anymore, you're going to be Israel." And it means struggle. Feels quite significant, doesn't it, that it means struggle. And he carried the scars of God's work in his life forever. I wonder what causes you to walk with a limp. And I don't mean that pejoratively at all. I just mean that there's things that are in our lives that we feel are the things that cause us to limp a bit. Maybe it's because life didn't quite work out how you wanted to. Maybe it's something about the way that your marriage is. It's very hard to own up to in a room like this, isn't it? But maybe you know, and you think, yeah, this, I don't know, maybe it's me, maybe it's them, I don't know. But this isn't quite how I imagined it would be. Maybe it's choices that your kids are making. You know, we're in that space now. Our kids are making all their own choices, and some of them feel really happy about, and some of them less so. It's just how it is. I've just been in the process of reading Miranda Hart's autobiography, the one that's called something like I Haven't Been Entirely Honest With You. You should read it. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. Because for her, this is about living with chronic fatigue. There's more complexity behind that. But what does that mean when you want to be someone where your career is taking off and it's going so well, and then there's this whole huge part of your life that envelops you? Maybe you have a tendency towards depression. That feels like something that causes you to limp. I struggle with migraines quite a lot. I really wish that I didn't. I've had them since I was 5 years old. It's the thing that causes me to limp. When I say yes to things, there's a bit of me going, and I hope that I'm well. I hope that I'm not taking a lot of drugs when I'm speaking to you. But yes, I'm not today, thank God. You know, there are things in our lives that cause us to limp, and then there's the things where God has met with us. And He's touched something deep in our hearts. Maybe He's dealt with something deep within us. An aspect of our character. Something about our behaviour, the way that we are. Something where it was the way we were brought up to think or believe. And God has dealt with us really deeply. And it's like He's done surgery on our lives. I'm sure that Jacob found it really difficult to see the face of God behind the person who was wrestling with him all the night. And I have found it, and I'm sure that you probably have, not always easy to see the face of God behind the struggles that I experience. Sometimes they really don't seem like God at all. But Jacob was able eventually to recognise the face of God behind the struggles that he was experiencing. A good while ago when I was in Skipton, I was the associate minister for a long time, like a really long time. And towards the latter part of that, my colleague was going to be retiring, so there was an end date. Honestly, I became increasingly frustrated with the situation. Like properly frustrated. Like probably a pain in the backside frustrated. Just found it so difficult waiting. I felt like I was ready. Honestly, I felt like I was better than him sometimes. There we go, that's being properly honest, isn't it? I felt like I could have done a better job. I was frustrated that I'd waited for so long. I also knew I had a choice to change church if I actually wanted to, but I just was wrestling with that. Wrestling with it so hard, struggling, whinging, complaining. And I was sat in an Advent meditation-y thingamabob that someone else was leading. And I was looking, and she'd put different pictures of different Nativity Bible characters up around the wall, and there were some questions that came with that. So I was sitting by the one that was with Mary. And God spoke to me. I didn't want him to. And I wasn't happy with what he said. But he said, you need to wait until this is full term. And then when it's given birth, all will be well. So if you want to short circuit this, you know, without the intervention of modern medicine these days, babies that are born very early don't have so good chances to survive. Thank God many do. But I really sense God said to me, if you want to push this, you can do that, but it won't go well. You need to wait until full term, and then this will birth well. I was really cross. I didn't want to hear that. I wanted God to sort it out, make me right. I mean, none of you ever think that, I'm sure. But I knew that God was saying, we're in this wrestling, struggling together, and you need to be patient with it, and you need to wait, and you need to be humble. And you need to be supportive, and you need to be generous, you need to speak well. Such an important lesson for me, but I didn't want to hear it. It was the right thing though, and it did end well, so that's good, right? Interesting, isn't it, that what Jacob first seeks to escape, he now embraces. This man who is wrestling with him, who he probably just wants to escape from, get away from me, leave me alone, I don't like this. He actually now embraces and won't let go. Because there's something beautiful about the forming that God does in us in the midst of the struggle, isn't there? If I was to go around the room here, I won't. If I was to go around the room here and say, when have you learnt most about God and yourself? I imagine that all of you would say, well, there was this really difficult time when. There was this really dark time when. Because in those moments of aloneness and vulnerability is often when we see the most of God. The most of his character, his kindness, his tenderness towards us, his goodness, his faithfulness. And we start to realise what we are like in the way in which God moulds and shapes us through those things that we find a challenge. So maybe there's something today that you actually want to run away from, and God is saying, no, I want you to embrace it. Now, there are things that we need to run from. There are things. But there are things that God puts in our path. He says, embrace this, because it's part of my plan. And his old name confessed his identity, and his new name also does. I said that I was a weird child. Part of the thing I used to do is to read every book that was on my parents' bookshelf. Probably the things I shouldn't have read, as well as the things I should have. And one of the books, which was an old story now, was a book called Hind's Feet on High Places. So you're all weird too. And the character in the book is a character called Much Afraid. And she is, as her name, much afraid. She's scared to do anything. She's scared to go outside her parameters, her comfort zones. She's scared to follow the great shepherd. She doesn't have any self-esteem. She doesn't have a sense of her own significance or worth, because she's much afraid. And eventually she finds it within herself to trust the great shepherd. And the story is the story of that. What that feels like for her as she goes up the mountains with her fear, with her anxiety, with having to be brave and go outside of her comfort zones, with having to trust the shepherd even when she doesn't want to. And eventually she gets to the top. You can block your ears if you don't want to hear the end of the story. And she's given a new name. And the new name is Grace and Glory. Grace and Glory. It says in Revelation, doesn't it, that on that day we'll be given a white stone with a new name on it that no one else knows. I wonder what you call yourself now. I wonder what you name yourself. I mean, normally we have like loads of names for ourselves. Some of them are things like, oh, I'm just really clumsy, I always knock things over. Some of them are, I'm a bit useless with this and that and the other. I mean, we don't give ourselves very good names generally, do we? I wonder what God is speaking over you today. When he's asking that question, what's your name? I wonder what he is speaking over you. If you were to hold that stone in your hand and say, God, what is my name going to be? I wonder what you would hear today. Maybe for some of you in this room, you need to hear that from God. You need to have that new sense of who you are in God, of where your identity really lies, of what God is really saying to you about who you are. Perhaps you're in the middle of the struggles. Perhaps you're in a dark place where you feel pretty alone. Perhaps actually you're heading through the top of the mountain and you're actually starting to believe who God says that you really are. And you're finding a new sense of life, and you feel certain that you are one of God's loved children. You maybe even have a sense that you're transforming from one degree of glory to another, becoming just a little bit more shiny. And there's still a long way to go, isn't there? I wonder what God says is your name today, and what you need to hear from him. It feels to me like a key question for us. It's not always so much, what is my identity? Because those things, a lot of them just come and go. You know, I was a teacher, and now I'm a minister, and I was a chaplain, and now I'm doing something completely different. I'm a counsellor, I'm a spiritual director, I'm a musician, I'm a retired now, I'm a stay-at-home mum, I'm looking after elderly parents. You know, there are lots of things that are transient. But there's something important about the fact that our truest identity is found in our relationship with God. And for many ministers, we want to say my identity is not found in the fact that I'm a minister of a church. Yeah, but it kind of is, right? And it's okay that it kind of is, because it is also our identity. But if that's the main thing, then that's actually really unhelpful for us, because that may be taken away from us at some point. Or when things go badly, if we measure our identity by whatever our measures of success are, we're going to feel rubbish about ourselves. When people say things to us that are hurtful and hard to hear, we're going to think, well, I'm kind of rubbish, or we'll fight, one of the two. But if we know that we are secure in who we are made in Christ, that's the foundation. That's never going to change. That's the identity we'll live with forever in the presence of Jesus. That's what gives us security and comfort and confidence to be the people that we're meant to be.